Hello Team FD and welcome back to Sunday Vibes. Of course, still not in the pub, although we've had news on pubs, haven't we? So maybe someday soon. And I've got to say the novelty of shooting at home is firmly wearing off. Fingers crossed for a trouble-free shoot. Dougie and Pat are joining me today. How are you guys, Dougs?
Yeah, no, good, thank you. Got my Betis shirt on. You guys can't actually see me because I'm having to film on my phone. But yeah, Betis shirt, sun is shining, ready for Sunday vibes, feeling good.
Pat, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Pumped.
Me too, just talking to two JPEGs at the moment. This is not exactly the most sociable of shoots, but alas, we start with Bradley Bissett's question. How do you turn Arsenal into a Champions League team on a budget? So he's given us a caveat there. Let's just supply the guys at home with a little bit of context because Arsenal's form since the resumption has been horrible. So they've lost 3-0 away to Manchester City, which was to be expected to an extent. City have come back very strong, but that 2-1 defeat away to Brighton has sort of brought the bigger picture back into the limelight, hasn't it? So if that result wasn't bad enough, Mari, Xhaka and Leno have all subsequently got injured. David Luiz got himself sent off and conceded a penalty. And Martinelli also injured his knee in training on Monday. And we're led to believe that is pretty serious. So all these various components have led to questions about where the team is going. They lost 5 of their 17 games at the start of the season under Emery and Ljungberg. They're 11th when Arteta was appointed, Pat. 7 points off the top 4. I kind of think, like, most people, they've improved since Arteta's come in. But have they improved enough, Patrice?
Enough for what? Like, I don't really know what you mean.
Enough to buy into us believing that Arteta is going to guide them back to the Champions League in the next 1 to 2 years, or has it become clear that it's much more long term than that?
I think it is long term, definitely. I'd say that we've definitely seen enough from Arteta to think that he's probably a pretty decent manager. But the problem is the same as the problem usually is, which is the quality of the player on the pitch. Like, well, not just the quality, I suppose, but also the style of the players. It's pretty clear from a lot of stuff that Arteta said that he is not happy with the makeup of the squad, nor should he be. The good players in the squad are far too old. There are lots of young talents, but they're slightly younger than you'd like. They're kind of the 18-19 range as opposed to the kind of 22-23 range. There's actually very little kind of peak age quality in the squad. There are a bunch of guys in there who were brought in on short-term deals in the hope, let's get back in the Champions League this year. Let's get back in the Champions League next year. So Socrates, David Luiz were those kind of signings. And they obviously haven't worked out. On the other hand, I think that Arteta has clearly shown that he can improve the players he has in front of him. The defence has got a lot better since he took over, and he's had to pull back on the attack to do that. But Arsenal's defence, certainly against Brighton, through the first 70 minutes, actually was very, very good. Then they gave up a silly goal from a set piece, and they pretty much had one defensive breakdown in the game, which was Mopai's goal at the end, which was a phenomenal goal, really. But in a way, I look at that Brighton game and I see people losing their minds about it. And I think we lost a game away to Brighton that we could easily have drawn or won. It was a very close run game. We also lost to Brighton at the Emirates under Emery, where we were very clearly second best. So from that point of view, I think I'm not that bothered about the result in a way. Like as far as I was concerned, it was always a long shot when Arteta came in that we would get Champions League football. I don't care about getting Europa League football. What I care about is rejigging the squad and getting experience for our young players. So from that point of view, I don't really mind. I kind of think the last few weeks of the season, I'm much more excited about seeing players get minutes, get some experience and see how they do, rather than thinking, oh God, are we going to beat Wolves? Are we going to finish, 6th instead of 8th? I don't think that actually matters at all. And I think the board overall seem happy with Arteta. The only question is whether they have the money to back him and remake the squad the way he'd like it remade in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, talking of the summer, let's discuss, I suppose, the summer going forward and past summers, Dougie, because in the last 3, 4, 5 years, there's been different figureheads running Arsenal's transfer policy, hasn't there, in the form of Wenger, Mislintat, Sanlehi more recently, Gazidis, of course, as well. Let's go through a few of their recent signings. Do you think there's been more hits than misses, and do recent business, is it going to set them up, like Pat said, moving forward, or do these players need to be having more of an immediate impact?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, there's sort of multiple factors to it. I think overall, I liked their business last summer. I thought Nicolas Pepe was a good signing. Did I think he was probably too expensive? I actually thought he was probably well priced at the time, considering the season he'd had at Lille under Christophe Galtier. You know, that attack of him, Jonathan Okone, Rafa Leao had been phenomenal to watch. And Nicolas Pepe had been a key part of that. And 72 million club record signing, 15 million more than Aubameyang. Has it turned out to be overpriced? Probably. But he's still only 25. And actually, his statistics aren't too bad. So he's made 31 League and Europa League appearances, 7 goals, 8 assists, a goal contribution every 132 minutes. And I think most people's issues with Pepe comes down to what was a pretty slow start for him. So he only contributed 2 goals in his first 13 league games. And although there was moments of incredible skill, I remember, I think it was against Burnley in his debut, he made some defenders look incredibly silly. But up until December, he didn't really get going for him in the league. But since then, in his last 12 league games, 4 goals and 4 assists. And his finish against Brighton, although I don't think he had a particularly good game, showed a player that can make the difference in tight games against a sitting defence, which Arsenal were coming up against. And his stats suggest that there's a serious player in there, if given more time to develop and without the fans getting on his back quite early, which with all due respect to Arsenal fans, they've complained about a lot this season, but I don't think they've hammered Pepe just yet. So he's taking 2.4 shots, which is obviously down from what he was doing in Liga last year, but that's not too much of a concern. 1.9 key passes, 3.5 dribbles. There's actually only 9 players in the Premier League completing more dribbles than him. And I think he is a really exciting player to watch. I love watching his ability to beat a man in tight spaces. The big difference is Lille last year were primarily a counter-attacking side that used the pace of that front three that I mentioned to break in sort of quick, fast, decisive moves. Whereas at Arsenal, he's obviously come up against more of a sitting defence, but I think generally he's been pretty good and shown glimpses. Other signings I think have just been really unlucky. Kieran Tierney has been so unlucky with injury. So he's only been fit enough to make 13 appearances for Arsenal, 10 of which were starts. Just came back from that hip injury and then dislocated his shoulder against West Ham. So he's missed 32 games for Celtic and Arsenal with injury. And he's only played under 400 league minutes this year and, has looked promising in those minutes, but hasn't really managed to get a head of steam up, has looked better in the Europa League, but it's really difficult to judge him so far on his performances for Arsenal. But I think most Arsenal fans are reasonably happy with, where they think he can go in the next 3 to 4 years. I definitely don't think there's any reasons to cause alarm bells. I think the biggest disappointment has been Dani Ceballos, probably on loan. I think we bigged him up for quite a few years, rightly so, for his form at Betis and then Real Madrid. And this was a player who made, over 30 appearances for Real Madrid in the league and Champions League last year. Loaned out to Arsenal and started really well. It was 2 assists against Burnley in his first game, but they remain his only goal contributions in the Premier League. And whilst his game isn't all about creativity, you'd probably expect to see a bit more from him, especially in a year that Mesut Ozil has gone from a squad player who the press rightly wanted to get into the side more often to really a bit part player who needs to be moved on. I don't think anyone thinks Mesut Ozil is going to have a rejuvenation back to his sort of 15-16 form where he created 9 opportunities for others. But, there's parts of Ceballos' game that are still pretty solid. 3.8 tackles and interceptions, that's up on last year. But his expected goals and assists per 90, so if you want him to be that player that can make a difference in the final third, hasn't really happened. So he's only on 0.1, which is down from 0.25. And he's part of a bigger issue at Arsenal in that the lack of goal contributions coming from midfield. So between Xhaka, Guendouzi, Ozil, Torreira, Ceballos and Willock, so a hell of a lot of players, 9 goal contributions in 126 league games between them. So I feel like Nicolas Pepe, more to come. Kieran Tierney, a hell of a lot more to come, mainly due to injury. And I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal didn't take up the option on Dani Ceballos, just because they clearly need another centre-back and they look like they're going to need another forward if one of Lacazette and Aubameyang leave. So hit and miss so far with Arsenal's signings from last summer, really, Chris.
Yeah, and the other big hit in there, obviously, Gabriel Martinelli. I mean, he's made a sort of quicker impact than any of us envisaged. £6 million from Itawana, 10 goals in 26 appearances, a goal every 180 minutes in the league and Europa League. So he's progressed nicely. He's probably progressed quicker than expected. We don't really need to get into David Luiz, I don't think, too much, despite the fact he's just signed a new contract, a year extension. He's on a lot of money per week, £120,000 a week. I assume the Arsenal board's thinking there in terms of elongating his stay was that this summer is going to be hard to recruit, and thus it's probably cheaper to keep a liability around as a warm body, and he can be decent on occasion, can't he? So I suppose that begs the question, Pat. Now we've sort of analysed recent signings, who should they bring in? I mean, William Saliba is, of course, set to return after that £27 million move from St Etienne. St Etienne not had the best of seasons in League and narrowly avoiding relegation. His form has been okay. He's, of course, missed a lot of games with the metatarsal problem in 1920. I won't go through his per 90 numbers, but we know he's coming back. Who else do you bring in? And on a budget as well, like the sort of question stipulated. Do you have any transfer targets in mind? Anyone that sort of fits the profile well?
Well, it really depends who you can sell. Like, I think obviously the major rumour at the moment is Thomas Partey. I really like Thomas Partey. I think he'd be good for Arsenal. I would probably not sign him myself, assuming you
Why
can
is
get
that?
him.
Sorry.
I just think the age is wrong, probably. There's been a lot of criticism recently as a player of him, and I don't quite get that, because I do think he is actually very, very good in his position. But it's more that he's 26, 27. And if you were to sell Aubameyang, for example, and say, you know what, we're going to rely on the youngsters we're coming through. You know, we're going to rely on Nketiah, Martinelli when he comes back, Saka. It doesn't quite make sense, because by the time those guys are hitting peak age around 22, 23, Partey's going to be 31 and need to be moved on. And actually, I don't think, while he's a good ball progressor, I don't really think that we do need more of a controlling presence at the base of midfield, but I do think that can be Torreira. Torreira got injured before the international break, before the season was suspended, and is not quite fit yet. But we invested heavily in Torreira, and I think he's an excellent defensive midfielder. To me, a problem is really moving the ball forward from midfield. Like, I think those statistics about the number of goals from our midfield, with the exception of Ozil and Willock, I don't really care. Like, the rest of those players, it's not really their job. And I think it's one of those things that people bring up, but isn't actually a great measure of where goals should be coming from in a side. But I think I would probably, if I had 50 mil to spend on Partey, I would probably rather go and try and spend, say, 20 mil on, like, Songare, and, like, 30 mil on Buendia or something. Like, that, to me, would be a much more sensible use of Arsenal's money to build a young side that's going to be able to compete in 2 or 3 years and is decent now, as opposed to this hope that one perfect signing will get us back in the Champions League. It's just not the way it works, especially when you look at the way that, you know, Chelsea are recruiting. You have to understand that the next season and maybe the season after that are not really realistic for you to get back there unless one of your players takes a huge step forward. And so, yeah, I think that if you want to get a controller or a box-to-box player, that makes perfect sense to me. I would do that. I wouldn't spend 50 mil on them. I would definitely get somebody who is like a hard-working, hard-pressing creator who is also press-resistant, which is what I like about Buendia, to kind of cover Ozil, really to replace him in the long term. And as for forwards, it depends what you do. Like, I think you definitely have to try and sell Aubameyang. I think you'd be silly not to, unless the money is absolutely awful for him. But to be honest, whenever I hear people saying we have to keep Aubameyang, I think this person is stupid. Like I mean, there's no way around it, because like he's on big wages, he's getting pretty old now. He's one of the few saleable assets in the squad. If you tie him up to a long-term contract, you've then got him till he's like 34, 35, which is exactly what Arsenal have done with Ozil, and it's put them in a difficult position. You'd be much better off selling him and reinvesting that money intelligently, rather than saying, oh, how will we score goals without him next season? Well, by trying to improve the squad across the board and making it fit what Arteta does. Like, Aubameyang's been good this year, but you can also see why he's not playing as a centre-forward for Arteta. Like, he's not actually the kind of high-touch, heavily involved in play kind of guy that you imagine Arteta wants from that position. So, I mean, Pepe is the real issue, that we spent so much money on him when we should have spent, 25 to 30 mil less. But yeah, I guess those are the main things I do. And as for centre-back, again, it relies on who you can ship out. I think you've got to try... Arsenal's by signing Mari permanently and giving Luiz this extra year, it kind of seems like they are kind of banking on being able to shift Socrates and Mustafi. And if they can do that, then great, we can talk about another centre-back.
Yeah, and we've spoke about how difficult it might be to shift dead wood this summer. Before we move on to potential centre-back signings, though, I did want to ask you, you spoke about Chelsea very briefly in your previous answer, Pat, making pretty outlandish signings or bids for players like Kai Havertz for 80 million plus. Do you think Arteta is going to want to make signings like Sangare for the team to be good in 3 to 4 years' time, or do you think his ambition will eventually become a source of friction, if that's the general direction the club have to take? Will he want to achieve greater success in the short term?
I don't know. We don't really have the evidence to determine that. But at the same time, when the club hired him, we always say, oh, well, he will have demanded certain assurances on what he's able to spend. But the club will also have said to him, like, this is the way that we're building now. Like, these are the players that we're kind of like looking at. And we understand it's going to be like a multi-year process. So really it comes down to whether Edu and Sanyehi are kind of strong enough to say, well, this is the way we're doing things. I don't think that he'll necessarily have an issue with young players so long as he feels that they're good enough and they suit his style. It's clear that he's willing to put faith in young players if they are willing to do the work that he requires of them. Like Guendouzi, actually in the last couple of games, I think has been pretty good. Saka, obviously, has been probably one of the most trusted players under Arteta. So I think that his attitude will probably be like, if they're good enough, they're old enough. And he'll obviously get a say in signings as well. The club aren't just going to sign guys with no reference to him. So I don't know. I don't worry about that too much. I trust that he's willing to kind of like stick with the process and develop players. But if it ends up being a problem later on, it ends up being a problem. Like, there's nothing to be done about it because we can't create money out of nowhere.
Sure. Let's move on to some of the centre-back targets then. We've got a bit of a short list down here that includes the likes of Nico Elvedi from Gladbach, the 23-year-old Swiss international, and Nikola Milenkovic, who I've been a fan of for a long time, actually at Fiorentina, of course, capped 18 times by Serbia. He's got a lot of Serie A experience for someone in his early 20s, has only 26 appearances this season as well, second in the team for league minutes, generally has very solid stats across the board, not just in his defensive work, but in his distribution as well. Dougie, give me a budget defensive signing, or which one of those would you opt for if you had to pick?
Of those two, I'd probably go for Elvedi, just because I think he's only got 1 year remaining on his current deal, so he's likely to be a little bit cheaper than Milenkovic, who, although Fiorentina haven't had a great last couple of years, they know that he's their key asset, really, to sell for big bucks. And the likes of Juventus and Inter Milan have sniffed around him in the past, so they'll be confident that they can get a pretty sizable bid in the next 18 months or 2 years if they hold on to him. But Elvedi's like an excellent ball progressor. He's very, very comfortable bringing the ball out of defence. 92% pass completion this year. Very solid defender as well. Only 23 years old. He's experienced at international level. My only issue with him is whether he's willing to swap a potential Champions League club next year in Gladbach. They've still got to sew that up for Arsenal, who don't look anywhere close to the Champions League at the moment, and potentially going forward for another 2-3 years. So if they could get someone like Elvedi, I think that'd be an absolute steal for anywhere between 20 to 35 million pounds. But again, I just don't know whether their priorities are at centre-back, because with Mari signing this long-term deal that David Ornstein was tweeting about today, I mean, they've got Luiz, Mari, Saliba, Holding, Socrates, Mustafi, Chambers and Mavropanos. And while you expect some of those to leave either permanently or out on loan this summer, that's one hell of a bloated roster of pretty mediocre centre-back talents in there, barring the potential of Saliba, Holding and Chambers, I would argue. So it doesn't really get any easier for Arteta. He's got to shift some of this deadwood, as you said before, and hope to bring in a target of suitable standard to lift up this team.
Do you agree, Pat? Is there an absence of a Champions League or a potential Champions League pairing in there? Do you see any hope?
I think it depends what you do in the midfield as well. I think if you manage to rejig the midfield so there's more protection and Tierney comes in and is as good as he could be, then that's going to give you a lot of help. Obviously, in the long term, to be honest, I have no idea how good Pablo Mari is. Like, he might be great. And it might be that he and Saliba and then Holding as the third choice is actually like a pretty decent centre-back core going forward. It might not be the case at all. Saliba might be totally unready. And Mari might turn out to be just like another one of these guys. But at least he's younger, I suppose. I think if Elvedi's got a year left on his contract, I didn't know that, then that's definitely somebody you should look at. Because I don't know if other teams are necessarily going to go for him, like top teams. I completely understand what Dougie is saying. Like, if he's offered a chance to extend his contract at Gladbach, I'd be tempted to do that as well, to stay under Marco Rosa. But on the other hand, Arsenal would pay him a lot more, and he can obviously kind of grow and develop with the side. And I think a lot of the time it probably comes down to whether a manager can sell a player on what they're trying to do. But yeah, to me, getting the balance in the midfield is absolutely the most important thing. I think that's going to prevent you having to adjust the attack to help the defense quite so much, and it's going to mean you can get the ball forward much faster. And some of that's already going on, but clearly personnel is going to be the key issue in making it happen.
A very balanced midfielder has not just become available. He's of course got a year left on his contract. Southampton did strip him of the captaincy this week and give it to James Ward-Prowse because he hasn't signed a new deal. Of course, I'm talking about Pierre-Emile Heiberg. He's a very well-rounded midfielder at 24, a lot of Premier League experience. Do you think bringing someone like that in could help bring a bit of balance to that Arsenal midfield?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also, it's just the sort of low-cost signing that Arsenal probably need to be making. If you can bring in a proven Premier League performer who's like good enough and potentially very good for about, 15 mil or something, then that I think would be excellent business. Like, fundamentally, if you're buying young players who you know to be good, then you're on pretty safe ground. And because if they stay as good as they are, then that's absolutely fine. They'll be decent squad players, decent rotation players. And if they have more than you're currently seeing from them, then they can really take off. And Heiberg, I think, is a good candidate for that. So yeah, this is why I'm saying Heiberg, Songare, Buendia, like these. I mean, Buendia is already playing at a high level, but these are guys who are on sides or have contract situations where you can probably get them for below market rate and are clearly good enough to contribute now with plenty of potential. That's exactly what Arsenal need to be targeting.
Nice. Get it done then, Sanlehi. All those big money signings last season, maybe appease some of the purists with some solid, savvy signings like Heiberg. Dougie, that leaves you with the unenviable task of finding us a centre forward. Speaking of players who only have a year left on their contract and players that we've been fans of for a long time, Arkadiusz Milik, worth a punt despite his injury issues?
Again, it really comes down to price. I mean, he's been phenomenal since the start of 18-19, really. I think it was 20 goals in 47 games last year. Since he's got over those injury issues that were plaguing the beginning of his time in Naples following his move from Ajax, he really has been very, very good. And this year it's another 13 goals in 21 League and Champions League games, close to 4 shots, 0.79 expected goals and assists per 90. Like, physically looks like ready to play in the Premier League. Doesn't seem to be any issues. He has picked up a couple of injuries this year. I think he's had 3 injuries which have kept him out for about 4 games at a time. So that is still the little concern. But their director, Giuntoli, told the press last night that if he didn't sign a new deal, which only has 1 year remaining on his deal, as you said, then he would be put on the market. And I think Napoli are under sort of no confusion. Illusions, that's what I'm trying to say, not disillusions. Illusions that this summer a few of their assets will probably leave. I think De Laurentiis said they were considering bids for Koulibaly and Alan prior to the window opening. So if people offer the right money for Milik, then I think he could probably go as well. Other than that, you're looking at kind of loan options. I think Luka Jovic, we've talked about him a few times. Kevin Volland's got 1 year left on his deal at Leverkusen. Hwang Hee-chan as well at RB Salzburg, 1 year left on his deal. These aren't players that sort of are going to set the world alight in terms of what the fan reacts, the fan opinion. But I think they could probably do a job at Arsenal, although Hwang Hee-chan's a bit more of a sort of an unknown quantity, as it were. The annoyance for Arsenal is that they didn't insert a buyback clause into Donyell Malin's contract, because he scored 17 goals in 25 games for PSV this season at only 21. So again, it just comes back to a few decisions over the last couple of years and letting Malin go, Benacer go, and just not activating these buyback clauses at the right time. But generally, I feel like Arsenal, it's not as bad as people are made out after these 2 games. They only lost 1 of their first 11 under Arteta, as you said, and that was against Chelsea, in a game that they played really well in. They got dismantled by City with a young team, which can happen to anyone, and then they conceded a 94th minute winner to Brighton in a game which was pretty chaotic in terms of the events going on and off the pitch as well. So I think hold your head, Arteta, Arsenal fans as well. Don't get too down, don't get too excited when it's going well either. Try and introduce a bit of regularity. And look forward to a summer where you really need to get it right in terms of where you want to be, not just next year, but in terms of the next 3 years. Because at the moment, their squad, as Pat has rightly pointed out, is pretty imbalanced, not only in ages, but in players that want to be there as well. So plenty of work to do.
Yeah, I suppose the whole necessity to rebuild quickly has kind of been exacerbated by the business that other teams are conducting, right? We've seen Chelsea plug some gaps very, very quickly. And they've made some extremely good signings in Timo Werner. Like we said earlier in the show, they're after Kai Havertz, which makes less sense because they predominantly need a left back and then maybe another keeper to challenge Kepa as well. But Pat, a few wild cards in there. Out of those centre forwards, who would you opt for, if any? And do you have any others to bring to the table?
I mean, if you could get Jovic, you get Jovic. Like, Malin is great, but he's had this serious knee injury, which is a bit troubling. Hwang Hee-chan, unknown quantity. Kevin Volland, probably the wrong age profile. Milik, I'd be fine with. I think Milik would be a good kind of short-term deal if you had no other option. But to be honest with you, as I've said, I would really aim for younger players. So I'd definitely be trying to get somebody like Osimhen if you can. I doubt that you'd have to pay as much for him as you paid for Pepe. If you could get him for like 50, 60 mil, I don't think that would be bad at all, to be honest. After that, the pickings start to get extremely slim very, very quickly. And yeah, I'm trying to think of like quality centre forwards around Europe that you can get hold of, but I think it's going to be tough for everyone.
So you've already kind of made clear that at the right price, you would sell Aubameyang for the bigger picture, right? For the good of the long term at the club. Would you take the same approach with Lacazette and in the same window?
It depends who you can get in. If you can do it, and it's going to mean that you can do loads of work on the midfield, get in a number 10, maybe get another centre back, you can get your centre forward. Like, if it means that you can do all that stuff, then yeah, sure. On the other hand, I think Lacazette's value is probably fairly low at the moment. But he's totally good centre forward. Like, he's a perfectly good centre forward. I'm not convinced that Milik is a better centre forward than him. There are quite a lot of players around who are extremely highly rated, but if they end up being as good as Lacazette, that'll be surprising. And also, like, there's no guarantee. So you can get rid of him and go and get somebody else if you want, but like, there's no guarantee that particularly players coming out of weaker leagues are going to be able to get to that level. I think Lacazette works hard as well and probably fits Arteta's style a little bit better than a lot of centre forwards around in Europe right now. So if I'm selling Aubameyang, I definitely keep Lacazette. In fact, if I'm selling one out of the two of them, I'm selling Aubameyang, just because of the contract situation and his age. But yeah, as for finding the next guy, it's extremely difficult, and that's the position the club have left themselves in.
Yeah, I think you raise an interesting point there about Lacazette fitting Arteta stylistically. Of course, Pepe having a lot of trouble with that at the moment, kind of being that disciplined wide man in a 4-3-3 system, because he was used to just roaming all over the shop and did so to great effect at Lille. But I think he'll come good. I'm a little bit worried about Hector Bellerin at right back. Not really like the same player since returning from injury, but that might be a conversation for a different time. We spoke about Arsenal for quite a while now, haven't we? So let's move on to our quickfire questions. Okay, our first quickfire question then comes from Oliver Boyson, and he's asked, should Phil Foden get in the England squad? Of course, a lot of chat about Foden after he scored that superb goal against Burnley. He got a brace, didn't he, if memory serves me correctly?
He did.
He did. So what do you guys think? What's your automatic reaction to this? Because all of a sudden, England have got a surplus of these sort of hybrid 8, 10 attacking midfielders. What do we think? Is he worthy of an international call-up, Dukes?
I wouldn't say at the moment. I'd like to see him regularly nail down a starting place at City next season. But the signs are really promising. I'm not someone that wants to put down his ability or over-egg it too much. He looks great in the minutes he's played so far. But I mean, prior to this resumption, he hadn't really started that many games, at least, and put up a run of consecutive games started. So he looks really promising. But as you say, Maddison, Grealish, Ali, even Ruben Loftus-Cheek, like, there's plenty of players in those midfield areas that are ahead of him. But he looks really promising, and his tactical versatility, like, we've seen him pick up positions on the wings in the last 2 games. He looks comfortable pretty much in anywhere in Guardiola's sort of ever-evolving attacking sort of sextuple that he's got going. So I would, just focus on City for now. Let's not get too ahead of themselves. But he looks really exciting.
Yeah, agreed. And the goals are coming thick and fast. And if that continues, then I imagine this conversation will pick up traction. Pat, do you think he has a higher ceiling than the likes of Maddison and Grealish? Because of course, a lot of people are talking about him like the second coming of David Silva, because that's what Pep ultimately wants him to be, I guess.
He hasn't really done anything yet. I mean, like, Grealish is probably at his ceiling. Like, you might be able to get more goals and assists out of him at a bigger club, but like, the level he's playing at is probably his top level given his age, and the fact that everything goes through him. Maddison's still really young and was phenomenal last season, has been okay this season. Like, if Foden ends up as good as Maddison, that'll be very, very good news for Manchester City. But yeah, I don't really know. Like, I think it's not terribly difficult for these, like, attacking midfield types to play for City. They have all the ball. Like, they need to work hard and stuff. But I think it would be different to play that role for England than it would be to play it for City, who are so ball dominant and have such a kind of carefully crafted system. If he's playing regularly and putting up good numbers by the next time England play, then sure, they can pick him. But for the time being, he's done very, very little at the top level. He needs to play a lot more and show that he can do this consistently, because doing it for 1 game is one thing, doing it for 5 games is another, and then doing it all season long is something that requires you to be actually good.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, unlike some of his contemporaries, he hasn't got that loan spell under his wing. Either has he, like a Ruben Loftus-Cheek, performed very admirably at Crystal Palace, or, Jack Grealish played all those games in the Championship. So the data size is small, but yeah, let's keep an eye on him. One more quick fire question then, and before we get into personal questions, And it is from AJ Larkham. And I actually think this could have been a title question. Who are the most underappreciated players in the Premier League this season? Let's try and keep this to a sentence then, fellas, and we'll jump into personal questions. Dougie, does an underappreciated player automatically spring to mind?
I was just having a think, and I think Willy Bolly's a really good centre-back and could probably do a job for a lower top 6 side. Really good passer, really good reader of the game, very physically, strong, powerful. I really like the look of him. Had a few injuries over the last couple of years, but Willy Bolly would be my pick.
Nice and quick, Pat.
Maybe Tammy Abraham. The fact that everybody seems to think that Chelsea had a real area of need at striker, given how good Abraham's been, has been ridiculous. I'm not saying they shouldn't have signed Werner, but Abraham looks like an exceptionally good young centre-forward. And if he doesn't get those minutes at Chelsea, he'll go elsewhere and get them.
Yeah, nice. I've sort of ran out of a new answer for this. It used to kind of be João Moutinho, it used to kind of be Ricardo Pereira. I'm scrambling around for one now in my head. Potentially, who's overperformed? Norwood for Sheffield United. I think he's been exceptional, actually. Right, personal questions. Do you boys want to go for knocking out a celebrity, a favourite pudding, or apart from football, what's your favourite sport? Dougie, you get to vote first.
I'm easy. I probably prefer the sport or the celebrity question. I don't really like pudding.
Pat?
I feel like we've done the sport one before, and maybe the celebrity one. But I don't care. They're all fine with me.
All right, so Dougie, I want to know which celebrity you'd knock out, and then I'm coming to Pat for your favourite pudding, mate.
Well, very deserved knockout would probably be Donald Trump. Give him, a massive hit in the face.
But what does this mean, though, when it's like, if you could knock him out? Like, is it guaranteed you knock him out, or do you just get a shot at knocking him out, like a free shot?
I'm not sure, because also if I knocked out Donald Trump, I'd probably be shot on the spot, so I don't really want to die for it either. So a celebrity that was, I think I've told this story before, but Aaron Ramsey was quite rude to me when I gave him his breakfast at Gleneagles at the Ryder Cup in 2014. That he just didn't say please or thank you. I don't think it deserves being knocked out, but he was quite rude. So Aaron, if I ever get the chance to meet you, I'm going to pull you up on that.
Yeah, no extra sausage for Aaron. Pat, pudding.
I think sticky toffee pudding is an incredible pudding. I think it's truly one of the wonders of the world. And a really good chocolate mousse, not the ones you get in pots, and to be honest, not the ones that you get where it's like just pudding, it's like slop. But if you get a really sick chocolate mousse, you probably need to go to France for it. It will genuinely blow your mind. Like, it will change your life.
I very recently bought the Milky Bar chocolate mousses. Well, white chocolate mousses.
Ooh.
And they're not as good as the normal Milky Bar yogurts. Have you tried a Milky Bar mousse?
No. I mean, firstly, I'd say that's not chocolate because there's no actual cocoa in white chocolate. But I don't know. I like the chocolate puddings. You know, the ones that have like the Freddo ones or the Buttons ones where you tip it into the pudding.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Those are tremendous. They're still around, man. You can get those. You can normally get like 3 for £1 or something. They're phenomenal. Yeah,
that's a trip down memory lane. I love those.
If it's just because I've got bigger, but the pots do seem much smaller now, though. Like, there's not as much tipping action when you go from one to the other. Right, I'll answer the third one then. And apart from football, I watch a fair bit of golf. The only other sport I've treated... it's a good walk ruined. The only other sport I've treated with any like seriousness in terms of playing it outside of football was swimming. I used to be a very decent swimmer. And in terms of watching it, yeah, maybe tennis or golf. And those questions come from Joe_CFC04, Sean Aldinio18, and Jonathan Hopwood. So thank you for those personal questions. We got through all 3. And that is a wrap for this week's Sunday Vibes. I'm melting under this bad boy. But these two managed to keep the cool and successfully rebuild Arsenal for you. So thanks for joining us, fellas. I don't know who the us is there. Me and my girlfriend. What else have we got to plug on Eurofootball Daily, Dukes?
So go and check out Friday's Continental Club. Working on that this afternoon, so I'm not exactly sure on the topic just yet. But and also go check out yesterday's Football Pyramid between McCubbin and Sam Obaseki, which was very entertaining.
Pato, fascinating podcast out this week.
Sam Abasaki and I talked about race in football, football's part in kind of moving society towards greater racial justice, and I think it's really good. I think that definitely right now everybody should be kind of taking some time to educate themselves, and that's something that we're going to try and do as well and help our fans with too.
The Extra Time podcast, normally of a very high quality, but taken on a much more noble cause this week. Looking forward to listening to that myself. That's it. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time, guys. Bye.